there was a part of me as like the quote unquote man that I shouldn't be feeling these certain things because I chose this open relationship lifestyle. I started getting in my own insecurities and my own abandonment issues. And I didn't communicate that to Jessica. It just sparked all of my abandonment issues from childhood, right? It just festered up into this thing that it shouldn't have been. But I am glad that it happened because I'm very grateful for everything that's ever happened in our relationship because it got me to really understand I can't hold things in because that just builds resentment.
When you said like, I'm supposed to be the man and, you know, like I said, I wanted this like lifestyle, which I think gets a lot of people into trouble with this. And you're like, well, I said I want to be open. So like, I shouldn't have any trouble with it. And then they deny any kind of like negative or like low vibrational emotions that are coming up like jealousy or fear. Because they're like, no, I said I want this. But it's so great to work with all of it because when you do kind of pull at those threads, you like learn so much about yourself. You become like better and more whole, like on your own. And then your relationship obviously gets better.
Okay. But yeah, it did build up into something that it wasn't supposed to be, but it's always about reconnecting and recommunicating. And that's an important lesson. You know, I would say that our relationship is so big. It is absolutely great. It's wonderful. Our communication's amazing.
Is it?
Yeah. You just see her smile. But there has been times that it hasn't been easy. Like at all. Sometimes it's been really hard. Do you want to talk about some of those hard times?
Sure.
Please
Take
proceed.
the lid off the box.
Yeah, why not? We're here, aren't we?
Well, you want me to just talk about the hard times? There's no question prompt for this?
What comes into your mind first?
Well, the first thing that comes to my mind is when you were having like a really hard time once. And I mean, we've had hard times in our relationship, not because of non-monogamy or because of polyamory, but there was one time where you felt really triggered and you felt like you weren't, like you could be losing me almost, which is so bananas to think about, but also we weren't connected.
Right.
You know, at the time I was traveling a ton, you were traveling a ton. This was like pre-pandemic. And, you know, there were a lot of unresolved, I think, feelings too, because we just weren't in constant communication like we are. And so, I mean, I can't speak to like what you were experiencing, but I felt so wounded and so guilty, I think, for having like such a beautiful experience. While finding out that you had felt like alone and at home or like because you were traveling too. So like on your travels that you felt like unseen and that your abandonment issues were coming up. And I had no idea.
Right.
It was literally like everything was fine. And then it was like, I was sitting in the airport when you like told me all this stuff, and it ended up being like a very big blow up, like a fight. And we were like on other sides of the world. And I was like, oh my God, is this really, how did I not see the signs?
Yeah.
And it really just was because you didn't speak up.
Thanks for turning this around.
While it was happening.
We're obviously married. No, that's true.
That's like the biggest one that comes to mind. It just like went way off the rails without, coming back. You know, we obviously brought it back, but do you want to speak about your experience?
I mean, I will say that it's because that I didn't have the communication, even though we preach communication, there was a part of me as like the quote unquote man that I shouldn't be feeling these certain things because I chose this open relationship lifestyle. And so, yeah, to give it a little bit more context and color, you know, Jessica's on the other side of the world. I'm here in the States, and, you know, she's doing her thing, which I completely support. But during that time, she did have someone she was really connecting with, which I actually wholeheartedly supported and still like support. But, you know, I started getting in my own insecurities and my own abandonment issues, and I didn't communicate that to Jessica. And what that ended up happening, it just kept being a compound effect of me building up this thing in my mind so much that like she's leaving me, which just sparked all of my abandonment issues from childhood, right? And so it just festered up into this thing that it shouldn't have been. But I am glad that it happened because I'm very grateful for everything that's ever happened in our relationship because it got me to really understand that communication is important. I can't hold things in because that just builds resentment, and to really grow outside of my insecurities. And then kind of like what you were saying earlier in the podcast of to trust love.
Mm.
to really trust that Jessica's not going to leave me. That was a really important lesson from it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting to hear you talk about it too, because I think what you just helped me understand is when you said like I'm supposed to be the man and like I said I wanted this like lifestyle, which I think gets a lot of people into trouble with this. And you're like, well, I said I want to be open, so like I shouldn't have any trouble with it. And then they deny any kind of like negative or like low vibrational emotions that are coming up, like jealousy or fear, because they're like, no, I said I want this. But it's like, it's so great to work with all of it, because when you do kind of pull at those threads, you like learn so much about yourself. You become like better and more whole, like on your own. And then your relationship obviously gets better. But I think that's definitely something for men more to, and this is also kind of a theme I feel like we've been talking about a lot on this show, is like allowing men to be vulnerable and for them to say like I am having these feelings. And women talk about this stuff, like we girls talk about jealousy. I feel like girls actually ask me so much more, and like clients that I've had, like, how do you deal with jealousy? Like I never hear that from guys. And I talk to guys about this topic all the time. And just, yeah, to know that for you, it was a compounding thing, because I kind of like, I know you so well that I can like hear in your mind, you were like, not supposed to feel this way. And you were like encouraging me, which was like the funny part.
Right. No,
Like,
it's true.
I was like in Bali, I think. And he's like, no, you should totally like go do this thing that you want to do. And I was like, okay, are you sure? Because there were like some considerations that I had, and you're like 100%. And I'm like, great, he's cool with it. So that was like the last conversation we had. And then like a week later, you were like, you were like, I don't know who you are anymore. And like, obviously we weren't talking a lot because it was like way different, the other side of the world, and like just time zones were like hard to like get on the phone. And I was like, oh, we went from there to here. Great. I'm on my way home.
It was a few weeks later, not just 1 week later, but
Okay.
But yeah, it did build up into something that it wasn't supposed to be. But it's always about reconnecting and recommunicating. And that's an important lesson to always come back to. Even today, like always.
Yeah. And we've closed our relationship on several occasions. I think because of these reasons too. We've been open for the majority of our relationship, but there have maybe been like a total of, I would say in the last 7, maybe like, I don't know, 6 months out of the 7 that we've been like a month or 2 here, a month or 2 there, until like we feel like we're back on track. And I mean, sometimes it literally lasts like a week.
Yeah.
And then,
we're open, but we just stay with each other mostly times. So you brought up something that like sparked something that it's funny, because when you and your girlfriends talk about this, generally when I talk about this with my guy friends, it's usually like, wait, you're in an open relationship. Wait, does that mean you can? Yes, that means I can go and have other women. Wait, does that mean she can have other men? Yes, that means she can have other men. And
I like how you say have.
Whatever.
Like you're having like a sandwich. I would say like be with, but it's just cute. It's just funny.
So like the natural expression from them are like, oh, okay, or cool, right? And it's always this kind of like, I don't know how the hell he deals with that.
Do they say that?
No, but you could tell that they're always thinking it.
See, the women will just say that. They'll be like, I could never do that. I don't know how you do that. Like, I think because women are much more relational, I think, in our like relationships and like the way that we are and the way that we communicate. So my thing is always like, even in like my DMs, people are like, now that I was doing the open late on Sundays on Instagram, that's like the number one thing. People are like, ask me a question, and then they tell me how they could never do that. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry, what was your question in there?
I guess it wasn't even a question. It was just more of like guys are so different, and they get like stunned when they think about my wife with like another male potentially, and to me, it's just like, well, I have that freedom and that capability too because of our open relationship. So does she. But there's like this huge stigma that you shouldn't. And I'm almost like very proud about it. But like, yeah, of course she gets to, And I think,
of course there's a stigma,
because
we live in a patriarchal society.
That's for sure. And also, I think they also get worried. I think guys are like really insecure and they don't want to talk about it.
Mm.
And they're like, oh, what if she leaves you? You know, I always get that kind of feeling. And in that sense, what would you tell those guys to like have them not worry?
Wow, that's so much to unpack. Look, if you're in an open relationship, it doesn't mean that your wife is not going to leave you. Like, it doesn't. I think that the relationship that we have, and not that we're like perfect, but we're doing non-monogamy in like such a way that it always circles back to like what's best for our primary relationship. But I would say that, look, the thing is, it's much harder for women to remain fulfilled and satisfied in long-term monogamous relationships than it actually is for men. I talk about this, but like I'm a huge fan of Dr. Wednesday Martin. She wrote a book called Untrue. And there's just so much to back up the fact that if women can actually have multiple partners, may they be men or women, it brings you back to a place of newness with your own partner.
Yeah, absolutely.
The way that like we get turned on by men over time actually subsides if we're with the same partner, and we need different things. And it's not just like novelty, which is also amazing. So it's great. We bring like shibari into the bedroom and it's fun and it's new, but we actually need like different chemistry to almost shock the chemical like reaction that we're having with one another, to then not be familial with each other. Whereas men, you take your clothes off and you've been in a relationship for 25 years and likely you're going to get hard. Like you are going to stand to attention and you're still going to want to have sex with me. And it doesn't mean that I don't want that with you as well. But the way our bodies actually become aroused is very different than men. And so I think actually being open helps us sustain our connection and helps our connection stay like new and fresh, because they constantly get to like reset our chemistry.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it feels so good to have that balance of variety, which is like a basic human need, and then consistency and security, which is like most people's number one. And I think a lot of our society lives from a place of a bit more concerned with security, because we do live in a lot of like fear-based or like lack mentality, where it's like competition, me versus her. If he looks at her, it means he's not looking at me, which is not the case. But people are more concerned with security. And that's why all the questions are, aren't you afraid they're going to leave?
Right.
People aren't asking monogamous couples who've been together for 10 years, aren't you afraid that your partner's bored?
Right.
Like, why
question.
are people not asking that question? People are asking it in their minds. And that's why 70% of people have cheated, you know? So I would say that the question itself is a limited question, and it's coming from a place of lack. And so we can answer it in a million different ways all day long, but it's actually like, let's examine why that question is the question that comes up first, and why it's like this need to answer this fear-based question, as opposed to like, oh, I wonder how that can add to a long-term like connection and could actually sustain it.
Yeah, I think you said that beautifully, really beautifully.
It's my brain. It's beautiful.
It's the most beautiful.